Welcome to our Farm Forward Transition Talks, recordings from the Farm Forward Conference hosted by Uplevel Dairy last month. On this episode, we sit down with Will McKinley from Menn Law to talk through the legal side of family farm transition, what to plan for, where things get complicated, and how to move forward with clarity and confidence. All this and more here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy producers and professionals who are committed to moving our industry forward. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and each week we bring you the leaders, the lessons, and real-world stories from the people who have built the dairy business we know today and those who are shaping its future. Join us on the journey by following Uplevel Dairy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and subscribe at upleveldairy.com to get new episodes and our Dairy Insights blogs right in your inbox. And while they are swapping mics there, our next Transition Talk panelist is Will McKinley from Menn Law. And so I'll give a little introduction on Will's behalf while he's getting mic'd up there. But Will is president of Menn Law, and Menn also now houses George Tuig's firm that many of you are probably familiar with locally. So I'll let him tell us a little bit more about that. But officially, Will, welcome to our panel today.
And 20 minutes is plenty with me. I can promise you all that. So the tie is now here, so we can get serious about things. So thanks for having me, and thanks for listening today. And honestly, thanks for being here, because the fact that you're sitting here means that you are leaps and bounds ahead of many of your peers. Coming to events like this, working with people, like Christy and Steve, listening to folks like Elaine, it just makes, as a lawyer, I can say it makes my job and my ability to help you infinitely easier. And it was fascinating listening to Elaine this morning, but more importantly, when she was concluded and kind of the takeaways, and the big one was communication. And I can say, as an attorney, I work with a lot of farms, do a lot of transition planning all over Wisconsin. And the it's critical. It's the most important part of this whole thing. And what happens is I have clients, they'll come, it'll be mom and dad and son or daughter-in-law or whoever, and they come in and they sit down at the office and they're new to me. And of course I sit down, and my question's always, how can I be of service? And I just kind of get a blank stare back. And it's like, well, I'm not a psychic. You have to tell me what it is you're trying to accomplish. And they, in many respects, they know they have a problem. They know that something needs to happen, but they don't know what that is or what they're supposed to do. And I say, I'm a lawyer. I can't tell you. You have to tell me. And so I always feel bad, because I think a lot of times these are such difficult, transition planning so difficult, that people come to the lawyer, whether it's someone like me who works more in this space or just their longtime family attorney, and they are just looking for me to tell them, here's what you're going to do. It doesn't work that way. I shouldn't say. It doesn't work that way well. There are lawyers who will kind of prescribe, this is the solution, and it's kind of a one-size-fits-all, but all that ends up doing is causing problems down the road. So I guess for me, starting off in our conversation, it's take that idea of communication to heart. And if you're having difficulty communicate, or if you're not able to do it, then work with professionals who help with that process. Because at the end of the day, it will end up making the entire result of the hard work you're going to do and putting into this process infinitely better. It will make it so much more successful, and frankly, infinitely less expensive. Because again, you come to the lawyer, and the lawyer is going to be the most expensive family counselor you will ever hire. I can assure you of that, and the least qualified. Lawyers all have our own emotional baggage. We are the least qualified people to be giving you psychological advice. We all have our problems. So I just want to start by saying that, because that was a big takeaway, both in what, Elaine, you were kind of preaching, but then what everyone was saying across the room. So it's spot on, it's exactly right, and it's critically necessary to make this meaningful.
So, Will, to build off of what you just shared, when someone makes the call to you or one of the colleagues at your firm, what, in your dream world, in your perfect world, what do they come to the table with?
Sure. In addition to, balance sheets and tax returns and things that are just kind of the perfunctory things that we need to look at, I always tell clients it's the transition planning on the legal side, because really for me, I'm the technical, right? I'm the guy that just puts the words on the paper to make sure you have the contracts, you have the documents that are going to be legally enforceable to make this thing work. So I'm kind of like, just the recipe book. And so when you come to me, it's kind of like designing a house. You got to come to me with, here are our concrete ideas. We really want to have a Cape Cod 2-story, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Believe it or not, I have people who will come to me and we'll sit down and we'll start talking. I'll just start kind of interrogating a bit. And maybe husband or wants the 2-story Cape Cod 3-bedroom, but wife wants a ranch 4-bedroom. Completely different house, completely different structure, completely different layout. And all of a sudden it becomes very clear, okay, well, you have completely different objectives. And so then my job becomes trying to mediate okay, what can you give up? If you can come to me with kind of the unified, if we could wave a wand, this is how we'd have it all work, then it becomes my job to say, okay, let's make it work. How can we do that from a legal perspective? How can we do that from a tax perspective? Those types of things. It allows me to be able to kind of get to the meat of it much more efficiently. So again, going back to that communication, talk amongst yourselves. I'm not saying you need to figure it out. That's why you need my help, is to say kind of what we can do. But you can certainly come up with a wish list of, if we can do it this way, this is how we'd like. And that's so helpful for me as a professional.
Thank you, Will, for elaborating on that. And this morning, as Elaine was going through different scenarios that she's seen with families across the country, and really throughout North America that she's worked with, I know there were moments where you're in the back and you're like, oh yeah.
Chuckling.
Yes, chuckling. So are there a couple of stories that come to mind that you think would be relevant to this group here? Maybe it's let's start with a success story.
Sure.
Of what you would call a successful move forward for a family that you've been working with. Yep. And then we'll talk about maybe one that stalled and why.
One of the problem that used to be, and it's still a problem, but it's not as prevalent, is the idea of the farm can only support one family member. So it was always whoever the oldest son is, you get the farm, right? And everyone else is kind of stuck. But more and more, we're now seeing the problem of, we don't have family members who want to take over the farm. What the hell are we going to do with this thing? And so it's now the transition planning of my generation of lawyers is dealing more with, how do we deal with non-family members coming into the farm and taking it over to ensure that the farm continues on. And so I had one last year that we were working on. It was 2 brothers. One had no children. The other had 2 children, none of which were interested in being anything to do with the farm. But they had a young herdsman he was the guy. He was the heir apparent. And so it was, how do we get him into this farm? And the 2 guys wanted to get him in, and the spouses were all on board with it too. But it's, how do we get him in, and how do we navigate this? It's especially complicated tax-wise, because when you're bringing in non-family members who are employees, it gets real messy. How do we do that? But then how are we fair, right, to the kids who are not on farm when there is a non-relative who is getting a really good deal? And so navigating that and having those discussions, it was those guys came in, they knew what they wanted. They just were like, we don't know how to get there, but this is what we want. And we got there. We got them there, and we got everything done, and now it's working great. And the bank knew what was going on. The accountants knew what was going on. The spouses knew what was going on. So again, really good communication on the back end in terms of making sure people knew this is what's happening and why it's happening and how it's going to work. So that's a good success story, and one that, again, deals with kind of a new dynamic that is happening in our industry, which is non-family members being brought into the operation as part of the succession.
And Will, I'm really glad that you brought up that example and also shine a light on just how common that is in our ag industry today. And so leaning back on that example in particular, I know a question a lot of people have is, well, how did you actually make that work? What were some of the strategies or vehicles that you were able to put into play to make that vision the reality?
Yeah. So in that circumstance, anytime you're doing a farm succession plan, it's not, it's not just, having a will. Typically, we're going to be using wills and different kinds of trusts, revocable trust, irrevocable trust. We're going to be setting up different entities. So, there is no one size fits all. And if you go on Google and you find some package that you can buy from LegalZoom.com for $2,500 and you think that's going to do it, I fully encourage you to do it, because that's going to be like a lot of money for me on the back end to clean up. So go for it. Totally fine with it. Totally use AI, use ChatGPT all you want. I'm fine with it, because I make more money cleaning up those messes than I do just doing it right in the first point. In that circumstance, so a lot of this it comes down to tax. It comes down to because every farm balance sheet is different, how you're taxed, your entity structure. In that circumstance, we were able to set things up to avoid a sale. So there's actually not a sale. We set up, I call it a farm pension. It's not, but it's basically an income stream to the retiring owners where they're able to draw what they need. So that $80,000 or $100,000, plus they get their benefits, they get their truck, they get their cable, they get their insurance. We were able to cash flow that. So to the point where one of the owners dies, and then we're able to then trigger a sale, and that sale is at a very good discount. And it takes into account the money that those retired farmers were able to draw off of throughout the course of their lifetime. So that's just one way we do it. And the big problem is because, all of your balance sheets have so many zeros on them now, that doing lifetime sales is just tax suicide. It really is just so hard. And so death is the best thing for transition planning when we're talking about taxes. Not good for the dead person, but good for everyone else involved. And so now we're having to look at strategies for how can we do this transition, but not necessarily transition ownership until someone croaks. And then we look at triggering that opportunity. So it's sometimes a really long runway to get the deal done. But again, with good planning and good documentation, it can work really well.
And Will, thank you for just shining a light on some of the examples that you've walked through with people, and also how you make that work on the back end of that to make those wishes become the reality for that family, those farms, and then sometimes, as you said, a non-family member that joins the operation. And in the last couple of minutes that I have you up here, Will, I do want you to just share the reality of where some people often get stuck in this process, and maybe a story or example that this audience could relate to.
So I love working with farmers. I did not grow up a farmer myself. I was in 4-H. I was a town kid.
He knew the pledge. I heard him. Yeah.
But my town was only 900 people, so it counts. But I will say I love working with farmers. On the flip side, working with farmers is exceedingly frustrating as a non-farmer professional, because you guys are so busy. And this is a process. So transition planning, it's a process. It's not come into the doctor's office once, get the shot, and move on. It's a series of meetings, if done right. And it involves me. It involves your CPA. It involves your banker. It involves money guys like Steve. It involves all these different players, and trying to herd those cats is impossible. And then, of course, you're planting. Well, now we're spraying, and now we're chopping, and now we're feeding, and now we're doing this, and now we're doing that. So I find I get like 2 weeks in early May, and I get like 2 weeks in October where everyone's like, oh yeah, we need to do this. Let's meet with Will. And so then I'm, meeting for 14 hours a day, trying to get these conversations in. And so I can't remember who was saying, I think, Elaine, it was you. And we were talking about you make time for funerals. And that was like so impactful because we all do it, right? We always make time for the funeral. You'll move that appointment. You'll have the kids out of school, whatever is needed. You need to have the same mentality when you're doing this type of planning. Make the time, figure it out, schedule the meetings in advance, have a cadence, have a timeline, but commit to it because life always gets in the way. There's always a chore that needs to be done. There's always someone calling in sick. There's always a kid's basketball game you want to go to. There's always an excuse, but you're going to run out of time. And the biggest enemy in transition planning from a legal perspective is the loss of time. I have so many people come to me and I say, if you had just come to me like 5 years ago, this could have been so much better. But transition planning cannot be reactive. It cannot be. At that point, it's just you're putting out a dumpster fire. You've got to be reactive. You've got to be not reactive, proactive. And to do that means you have to commit to the time that's necessary to do what needs to be done. So that for me is kind of the biggest impediment. And if I could say anything walking out of here today, don't put it off. Don't put it off. The earlier you can do it, the earlier you can talk about it, the much more success you're going to set yourself up with, not just you, but the next generation to come.
And Will, you have an entire team at Menn Law that specializes in these things.
Yeah, so our firm, we're based out of Appleton. We've got offices throughout Northeast Wisconsin, but we serve clients literally all over the state of Wisconsin. I was down in Sharon like 2 weeks ago, got a tenderloin sandwich, which is great, pork tenderloin, because I grew up in Western Illinois, so I can't get them up here. But I can get them in Sharon, Wisconsin, of all places. We have 4 attorneys that work for our firm that do nothing but ag work. So we work with farmers or allied professionals. George Tuig, some of you may know that name, 77 years old, still going strong. He's my mentor. I'm his succession plan. So he and I work together in transitioning his clients to the next generation, just like they're transitioning the farm to the next generation. We are a full-service law firm, so we handle not just this type of work, but if you got probates, trust administration, if you're fighting with your neighbor over a fence line, we do all of that stuff as well. And so we're always happy to be of service. But I think what makes us unique over other law firms is we speak the language. We understand the psychological dynamics that go into farming, and just it's different. You're not a manufacturing company. It's just a different creature altogether, and we get it. And so we're happy to work with you and help you on your journey as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Will.
Thank you.
This was just one of the transition talks recorded at the Farm Forward Conference held last month at the Farm Wisconsin Discovery Center in Newton, Wisconsin. A big thank you to all of our panelists, Will McKinley of Menn Law, Tommy Ersch of Swiss Lane Farms, Christy Pagel of Leading Edge Consulting, and Steve Bodart of AgriGrowth Solutions for sharing their expertise on the legal, financial, and communication side of family farm transition. If today's conversation sparked ideas for your own farm, stay tuned. We will be releasing a full hour-long panel episode later this week, featuring all of these experts, plus family farm coach Elaine Fraze. Also, thank you to all of our sponsors for the Farm Forward Conference, including Zoetis, CP Feeds, CMEX, Nicolet National Bank, Greenstone Farm Credit, Central Star, and Valley Vet, as well as AgriGrowth Solutions, Menn Law, and Leading Edge Consulting.